Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. And regardless of which radio station you tune in to hear this on, I want to also mention PEG TV also runs the programs, and you can get those by going to the PEG TV website. They're archived, so you can listen to them at your convenience, and we really appreciate our partnership with PEG TV in that regard. So we normally speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we are looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair coming up in August of 2026. Many people refer to it as either the Rutland Fair or the Vermont State Fair. And we, again, are very grateful for their support, continued support for this program. And we are going to talk today to an old friend who has recently gotten a new job. Lyle Jepson is with us today by telephone. He is now the commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the whole state of Vermont. And first of all, Lyle, welcome in, and thank you for taking time out today to chat with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be back.
And I want to know right off the bat, what's different about this job? And you and I go way back, probably 30 or 40 years. You were involved for many years in both public and technical education. And then, of course, most recently as the executive director of CEDAR, the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region. So a lot of that may have had a little bit more narrow focus for you. But what are some of the things that are different for you about this job besides, and by the way, for people that don't realize it, Lyle is actually commuting every day back and forth to Montpelier because he did want to stay in Rutland with his residents, and we deeply appreciate that. But what's different about this job based on your experience since November?
Well, again, thanks for having me. And I do want to start with the emphasis of I'm deeply dedicated to the Rutland region. And I think that one of the reasons that perhaps the governor was interested in having someone be from this part of the state is that he recognizes that growth potential, particularly in Rutland County, is far greater than in some other places. There are a lot of positive things going on right now in Rutland, and Rutland County, that is, and the city have really taken advantage of some of the things that I'm now being introduced to at the state level. And when you say what's different, what really is different is there's a lot of similar activities going on to what we were doing at CEDAR. In Montpelier, it's just more statewide, and it's making sure that people are aware of all the programs that are available to them. And frankly, I've learned a whole lot in the last, almost 8 weeks now about opportunities that are available. And when it comes right down to it, over those last 30 and 40 years we've known each other, Brian, it's about communication. And I think that you're doing that as a legislator. And again, it's just making sure everyone's aware of the programs that are out there. And we can certainly talk about some of those today if you'd like to.
Yeah, no, I'd be flattered to be able to get into a little bit of detail about all of that. I know that the governor, who was lieutenant governor when I first was elected to the Senate, and now is enjoying his 10th year as governor of the state of Vermont. And I won't let any cat out of the bag, I don't think, because it's just my opinion right now. There's certainly nothing official, but I am pretty sure that we will see Phil Scott put his name on the ballot again in the upcoming 26 election. So he will have served 12 years by the time he's finished with that term. And it's always been one of his, I think, hallmarks that he has three basic things that he tries to do all the time: grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and also take care of our most vulnerable folks. And I think he's done a great job. He is easily, if you just take a look at the voter turnout and the voter results, the most popular governor in the country. He has garnered up to 71% of the vote in the last election. So he is focused on the economy for sure. both urban and rural economies, and also housing opportunities, reforming education, and we can certainly talk about some of those things, and improving public safety. So, I'll just sort of sit back and let you tell us all what some of the things that you can see happening for us.
Well, and I'll agree with you on the governor's priorities. When we last met, those were, he did list out the similar things that you were just talking about, housing being near the top with education. And I think that one of the reasons that we may see him running again is that he wants to make sure the education piece gets resolved. Right now, it's a little bit up in the air. We know that the redistricting committee didn't necessarily come back with what was expected. They went a different route, provided a different type of report than may have been asked for. And so now there will be more conversations about how to reduce the number of school districts that we have within the state to try and bring some affordability into the equation. The governor does speak about housing, education, obviously public safety, and that word you used before, which is affordability, that we need to be able to afford all of the things that we would like our municipalities to have and our schools to have. And a lot of that comes back to the department that I'm working in right now, which is the Department of Economic Development. But before I get off public safety, we know that there were some changes made in Burlington because they were having some issues in their downtown, and the governor stepped in with some support with the Vermont State Police, also with additional judiciary support. And my understanding is that the Burlington area is greatly appreciating that support. I would imagine that some of those options might be available for other communities if they needed them, and it would be a great conversation to have those communities have with the governor. But as far as programs go, Brian, one of the things that I think we've seen recently is the Brownfields Program Initiative has supported quite a number of projects in the Rutland region, and the Brownsfield Revitalization Fund is intended to clean up sites that have had spills or chemical issues. And what you're seeing happening right now in downtown Rutland with the hotel project is that you're seeing the old newsroom coming down on Center Street in Wales. And then there will be some remediation happening, and primarily it is Brownfields funds through the state and federal government that are supporting that cleanup. Other site that was in the Brownfields program was the Marble, I've got to get the right terminology, Marble Village out in West Rutland. And that was recently opened with 24 housing units, and there was about $600,000 of investment that came through the Brownfields program. So there are activities happening on behalf of Rutland City through the programs that come out of our office at the Department of Economic Development that are happening statewide. So that's just one program. And if you look at, I'm going to stick on the Brownfields program. Sure. Yep. If you look into how that's spread out over time, over the last 4 years, about $23 million worth of cleanup funds have been allocated around the state, and that's in 11 counties. But what it has helped is to create as many as 750 housing units. So development through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's Housing Division really couldn't happen unless the Brownfields cleanups took place first. And so there's a strategy behind funding Brownfields so that housing can be developed. So that's one of the things we're working on in our department. Another program, and it's funny, the first thing that I found myself doing within the first week was that we took a trip to Newfoundland. The governor said, well, we're going to Canada. And he said, we're going to Newfoundland in the fall, which was maybe not the month you necessarily want to go to Newfoundland, but we went. And it was the New England Governors and Eastern Canadian Premiers Conference. And the goal of that conference was to enhance and continue cross-border collaboration. It's been a little bit of a difficult time with the federal government not necessarily supporting that collaboration as much as it had been in the past. And our goal was to make sure that the Canadians recognize that our relationship is rock solid and that we continue to support them and want to continue to have economic and tourist interaction well into the future. It was a great conference, and we will be hosting that conference in Vermont next year. And we're hoping to do some business-to-business activity. And we look forward to the conference probably happening sometime in August or early September.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the Canadian influence in both Franklin and certainly Chittenden counties. Former Senator Dick Mazza, who chaired for many years the Transportation Committee and was a really solid, wonderful man and passed away last year, but had a store that depended quite a bit on Canadian tourism dollars because it was right on the lake when they came down in the summer. And I would often talk to him last summer or maybe in the spring about the difference between what was, I guess, in most cases, a normal sort of summer and what happened last year. And he said it was definitely off, that there were fewer Canadians coming down by boat, certainly, and that, it made a big difference in the economies of both Franklin and Chittenden counties. Many of them probably came all the way down into Rutland, but those were the ones that the two counties there that I think most greatly felt that impact. So I'm glad to hear that we're back and that the Canadians and the Americans are together again. As you say, it's a different landscape than it was in Washington. Some of folks think that's a great idea. Some are a little bit more reserved in their opinion of what's going on. But there were a lot of cuts, and it's not the way it was for many people I know. So I want to just skip a little bit ahead and mention something that you had a lot to do with, the airport committee here locally. You were, technically, I think you're still a member of the committee, but I know that you haven't been able to attend the last couple meetings. And we did talk about putting legislation in this coming session that would allow people a little bit of tax relief if they purchased airplanes. And we talk a lot about the economic development potential of the Rutland, or the Vermont State Airport, if you will, at Rutland, but everybody calls it the Rutland Airport, where we want to do something pretty substantial, I think, with terminal redevelopment, make it larger. We want to build more hangars and all that kind of stuff. So I did put together a bill, and I am going to introduce it, but what came out, Lyle, and we're talking with Lyle Jepson, by the way, who's now the commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the whole state. When I last actually saw you in person, you were yet to be into that, so you were still the executive director of Cedar. But anyway, it's not as cut and dry as I thought it was going to be. And the tax department got involved and took a look at the language and suggested some changes. But I did put it in. I am going to introduce the bill. And then I think it'll either be up to transportation or possibly finance, because it is a tax bill, to sort of flesh it out and see where we're going. But that has become a really fun committee for me to be on. And Jim Marsh, who's committee chair of that, is doing a great job. And Bob, vice chair, is doing a great job too. So I did want to let you know there is a bill. I don't know whether it will get to the finish line or not, but at least we're going to have, I think, a little bit more of a focus on developing that airport area. And I know that there's a lot of people that, there are people that want to buy airplanes and store them in Rutland, and we need more hangar space and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing I did want to mention.
And you're spot on that is an economic engine for the county.
Yep.
And there is a plan. They have their where they would like to put hangars. I know that they're on the west side. There's a private developer who's very interested in doing some work there. It goes hand in hand with what Cedar is currently working on, which is bringing a water line from the industrial park phase 1 to phase 2 to hopefully expand that. And if water is needed on the other side of the airport, there will be a connection there for future activity. So, yeah, the airport, very, very important. And one of the reasons it's real important, Brian, is that in 2024, we had 16 million visitors come to Vermont. And that's a huge number. And many of those are coming by air. And the more people that fly into Rutland Airport and out of Rutland Airport, the more federal money that will follow that. And if I can just stick on tourism just for a second, of those 16 million visitors, they brought with them $4.2 billion worth of money to spend on goods and services, which is huge for our economy. It's about 10% of our gross domestic product. So tourism continues to be something that supports us locally and throughout the entire state.
Yeah. Now, we also mentioned, you brought up the downtown hotel, which will be breaking ground, I guess, technically next spring. There's remediation efforts first with, and again, my hats are off to the Belden company and the Belden family for grabbing hold of that and being willing to certainly take some risk there. And they will be digging that out. As you mentioned, what was the newsroom for the Rutland Herald will be taken down, and there'll be some work done to dig up what is contaminated soil and ship it out to the Midwest somewhere. I don't know exactly what they do. I guess they can treat it and reuse it somehow, but that's their problem, not ours. And then we'll see the actual building, I think, begin next spring, and with it will be a massive infrastructure change on both Center and Whale Streets. And then you combine that with what's going on across the street at the Paramount Theater and the old Richardson building. And you mentioned this right off the bat, Lyle, that there are certain things that it seemed like everything is just lined up perfectly for some real substantial growth and some prosperity, I think, for the Rutland City and Rutland County areas.
Yeah, and the Paramount, a great example. They're going to drive, again, probably more than 100,000 people through their doors, and that will increase over time. And they just launched a campaign to finish off what they say will be the completion of the project, and I think they're looking for about $400,000 to really put the bow on top of that. And it's amazing if you've been in recently. The difference between what was and what is eye-opening, and patrons are going to love it, I'm sure. And the Beldens, I couldn't agree with you more. They're a family that's going to be here, stay here, and this is their city, their county, their state. They really are investing and taking a lot of risk. They know that the work they're doing is going to help move the entire region into the future. And part of what has happened, and I'll go back, it was before my time with the state and the Department of Economic Development, but I'll pat the folks on the back that are up here. There's some amazing people. There was the $3 million, or several $1 million has been put into the project for Center Street in Wales, a $3 million NBRC Catalyst grant. And NBRC stands for Northern Borders Regional Commission. And our governor, Governor Scott, sits on that commission, and he has been very, very active in driving and directing money into the state of Vermont. The commission oversees the northern border states, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Vermont, and those governors sit on that committee. And I wouldn't say they vie for the money, but they certainly do make sure that they're having money go to their states, and Governor Scott's doing that very actively here. With $3 million coming to the Center Street and Wales project and Center Street project. $3 million went to the Killington TIF project as well. $500,000 went to the Benson Village Store project. So you're going to see money flowing towards Rutland County.
We're going to take our first break, I think, Lyle, at this point, and we have a couple other things lined up to talk about. Again, folks, we're very happy to have Lyle Jepson aboard with us today, who is now the Commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the whole state of Vermont, and we'll be back with Lyle in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs show here at Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, happy that you have decided to stay with us for the hour. And our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. The 180th Vermont State Fair, folks, is not that far away. It'll be coming up in August of 2026. And today we're thrilled to be talking with our new commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the state of Vermont, Lyle Jepson, who spent many years in education. Lyle was back at Stafford Tech for a while. He went over to Randolph for a while, and then, of course, ran Cedar, most recently the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region. But the governor tapped him on the shoulder back in, well, I don't know if it happened as quickly as I think it did, but back in November anyway, you were appointed. I'm not sure how further back the discussions went. It's none of my business, but I'm glad that you're there. Because we finally, I don't say finally in a bad way, but we do now have someone at the state level who has a very special fondness for the Rutland County region, and I think that's really, really important. And I know you're going to do us proud up there, Lyle. So thank you very much for accepting the position. There must be, well, maybe not yet this year, but I think there'll be days when if you do drive back and forth every day, it gets a little tacky sometimes with the storms. I choose to stay up there during the week from Tuesday through Friday. But anyway, congratulations.
On that note, Brian, I got to tell you, it has snowed more days while I'm traveling than not this year. It's great for the ski industry.
Yeah. Sometimes a little inconvenient on the road. Yes, absolutely.
And I've been at it since the early November. And I was driving in my truck one day in October and got a phone call in my truck asking if I had any interest in that position. Well, I had never even thought about it before. Yep. But it is more of what Cedar does, and just on a statewide level. Okay,
that's fair. Yeah. Is there anything that surprised you about the new position that you like, oh, wow, I didn't know about that kind of thing? Or is it just sort of like old hat already?
Well, it was definitely like, and still continues to be, a little bit like drinking through a fire hose. There's a lot coming at you all at once. Yeah. And one thing that I learned, I knew about it, but I didn't know enough about it, and it was the captive insurance industry. And we have the largest captive insurance industry in the world in the state of Vermont. We license 1,413 captive insurance companies, which means they're all separate businesses. But what happens is a company self-insures like health insurance. They're self-insuring through a company that they create, and that company is licensed and housed in Vermont. And we have 1,413 captive insurance companies, and they work out of the National Life Building in Montpelier. And as a result of all those companies, there are about 500 jobs that have been created in the state of Vermont. And each year, about $35 million worth of fees go into the state of Vermont because they're taxed. Each of these companies are taxed a certain amount of money, and so that money flows into the state coffers. And so we have a very unique business here in the captive insurance company industry, and I really was not terribly aware of that. And they invited me to their recent Christmas party, and they are quite a group of people. So we're very lucky to have that industry in the state.
And I'm glad you explained what it was, because I think to the average person on the street, when you say captive insurance, it sounds like somebody's being taken hostage, and it's kind of a negative thing, or at least people don't really understand what it means. So thank you for that explanation. And regardless of size, a company could self-insure. Is that what I'm gaining from this?
Well, and that's a good question, because you will need to have a certain number of employees to make it feasible, because you're putting money in to basically cover your own health care. And you will need a company size large enough, and I don't know what that number is, but if people are interested, they just need to reach out. We have Brittany Nevins, who is the person that works in our department, who is all over it, and she travels the world talking to different businesses about joining Vermont in the captive industry. And I wish it wasn't named that either, because it kind of sounds like tax increment financing, TIF.
Yeah.
TIF should never have tax in its name because it's not a tax. But so maybe we need to come up with a different name.
Well, it's an important consideration, too, given the situation in Washington with the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. Potentially, well, I guess they will end, depending on when you're hearing this program, when the Senate and House return back in January. It'll be a different situation for many people, not everybody, but for many people, because some of the subsidies will be going away. So if people had a chance to self-insure, especially the health insurance, that would be a great thing. And I know whenever it comes up on the Senate floor, Senator Ann Cummings, who's the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, does the report. And I've always tried to listen a little extra hard to understand what is going on. But it always is a bill that passes, and it seems like it's a good thing. So I'm glad that you brought it up, and thank you for the explanation for sure. I don't know whether you want to move to the education piece next, or I know we had a couple other topics, APEX and Vermont Training Program, and CHIPS was also, or CHIP, on the agenda to talk to you about.
Well, we can certainly start with education. As you pointed out, I had a couple of years in education, and what is happening now, obviously, is the need to redistrict. We have far more school districts than we can probably afford right now, and that's, you saw or heard about the governor's recent letter on property tax increases as high as 11.7 or 8% in the coming year, which puts our taxes up probably 40% higher than they were 5 years ago. And that's due primarily to the cost of education. When I first got into education, 35 years ago, 40 years ago, there were 120,000 students in the system. Now there's about 84,000 students in the system. And so the cost per pupil continues to rise and is becoming unaffordable for many folks who want to own their own homes and be in Vermont. So there needs to be a change in the system, how it's financed. Part of that, the governor is supporting consolidation of school districts and having them redistrict so that there's a little bit more centralized authority over things that are happening. So there's been conversation around how many should that be? Should there be 100? Should there be 14? As a former tech center director, I'm sure that they're going to maintain a focus on the tech center so that there's equal access, but on the part of all students. So it's a big conversation, and it's an economic development conversation, because people will move to the state of Vermont if the quality of education is such that they know their children are going to go through a system that's high quality. And we have a lot of teachers out there who are amazing and doing amazing work. We need to support that, and we need to support that with the funding that's necessary, but we need to make it back to that affordable word.
Yeah. Two things I just want to jump in. You mentioned school enrollment or school population. It was upwards of 125, 128, whatever it was a few years back. It's now at 82, I think you said. And the other thing that I saw from the Agency of Education is they can sort of project ahead. If you look at fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth, you'll understand how many are coming into the next level up. And the projection that I saw was that we'll be about 77,000 by 2030. So it has not bottomed out yet in terms of the school enrollment. There'll be fewer and fewer kids for the next few years, and that adds to it. And then the other thing I just want to mention, and certainly some props go out to David Walk, who was part of the task force that was charged with coming up with maps. I can't imagine that there'd be a more qualified person anywhere than David Walk to sit on anything with regard to that. I know he had not felt necessarily that the task force was doing what they needed to, I think he made that pretty public that he would have preferred them to come up with some maps, but they didn't. But, we were glad to at least have representation in Rutland County with former Senator Dave Walk, now Judge Walk, on that. And I'm kind of disappointed that the other folks that were on that task force didn't listen to him, because I know he must have provided some good counsel.
Yeah, well, he and I believe it was Senator Beck had put forward the suggestion of having districts be revolving around the tech centers. That's not how the report came out, but it certainly was put out there. So I appreciated his actions on that. Yeah.
The other thing I'll just mention, we are looking, and our tax commissioner is also from Rutland, or at least part of the family, Scholdice, and so Bill is our tax commissioner. And December 1st every year is when the letter comes out that, again, it's a projection, probably more accurate than not, that we'll be looking at near a 12%, again, across the board. So some communities, some schools will be less, some will be more, but it's around 12%. So last year, based on what was going to be, I believe, I got to make sure I got my figure. I know how much we bought, or how much money we used to buy it down. I think it was going to be somewhere around 7%. And we put in $111 million, some of which was one-time money that we got from, the three funds that come in: transportation, education, and the general fund. And then some of the other part of it was the education fund itself had a surplus last year. So we spent about $112 million to buy that property tax rate down from what was going to be 7% on average to 1%. So this year, we're looking at, somewhere, if you round it up, 12%. Okay, so, wow, that's going to go up again. The governor has proposed that we take $75 million from what is, again, one-time money. And I like the way he phrased this. I was on a call with his spokesperson the other day. They're going to fence off about $75 million, and it'll be in the Budget Adjustment Act, the so-called BAA. And part of what will happen is that we're going to need a little bit of an assurance that we're going to do something about the educational, both governance and funding, in order for that $75 million to be spent to buy it down. But that's not going to buy it down to 1%. If you start at 12% and you put 75 against it, based on what last year was with 7% and 111, it's still going to be about 6 or 7% when we get done. So I just want people to be aware of that as we get closer to it. But I thought it was a great idea to at least tackle that the way he did.
Yeah, and he has signaled that. He's looking for support around that concept. But the problem, doing it this year again would be great. However, we can't rely on that well into the future. We need to right size the ship. And so that's why I think the governor is very interested in doing the redistricting and making other changes.
Yeah. And that, as you point out, I don't know what the magic number is for the number of school districts or supervisory unions. Is it 50? Is it 10? Is it the governor proposed 5 districts? I think he knew that probably was that the rest of the General Assembly was going to say, you know what, that's a great number. Let's go with it. And that didn't happen. And I don't know what the magic number is. Is it if you pair it up against the tech centers, you're at 12 or 13, I think. Maybe that makes some sense. You certainly have a model there with which to start and start making some decisions. Minimum class size and the so-called foundation formula also work into this very complex formula too.
Yeah, there will be lots of conversations coming up, and you're going to be right in the middle of them, Brian.
Yes,
so
I am.
Something to look forward to.
Yes, I am, for sure. Yeah. All right, so we'll let the education kind of thing go. More to come on that. It'll start, I think, with both the House and the Senate Education Committees. And by the way, Senator Weeks and Senator Williams, both from Rutland County, are on the Senate Education Committee. So they will be there along with Seth Bongartz, who's the chair. and they'll be looking at different ways to change what we have. And I don't know what the end result's going to be, but there'll be a lot of hard work that will go into that for sure.
There will. And everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants a quality education. They want it to be equitable for every kid in the state of Vermont. So they're keeping their eye on the prize for sure.
Yep. Tell me what APEX is.
Yeah, that is, we have in Vermont something called the APEX Accelerator. And don't ask me what the APEX part stands for, APEX. But what APEX does, we have 6 different advisors. They are in our Department of Economic Development, and they work to connect Vermont businesses with state and federal contracts. And there are millions and probably billions of dollars out there of state and federal contracts that they will connect businesses, Vermont businesses that are currently in business with. And it can be all the way from doing the landscaping for all of the government businesses in the state to defense contracts for the State Department of War, they call it now. So there are millions and millions of dollars brought into the state of Vermont by the APEX program, which I didn't know a lot about until I got in my current role. I did know that Betsy Adams was here in our Rutland region. She is our local advisor. And so if you are a company that is interested in learning more about state and federal contracting, would love to talk to you and would connect you up with the local advisor in your region.
Okay. How about Vermont Training Program?
So that's another program we have. And for probably 8 years now, the Vermont Training Program has been working to connect funding with businesses that need to upskill their current employees. So let's say you have someone that is going to need to learn on a new piece of manufacturing equipment that you just purchased from Italy. It's arrived, and now they need to be trained on that. There are 2 different ways we can provide funding, one of which is the person that comes from Italy to train people on that new piece of equipment, we can pay that person's fee for coming to do that. Or we can pay for half of the salary of everyone who is going to be trained or upskilled on that piece of equipment. We can pay half of their salary while they're going through that training. And sometimes when someone's being upskilled, it could take 2 or 3 months to actually get to the point where they are proficient in using the equipment or the process that they've just learned. We can help through a contract system pay for half of their salary while they're going through that. And that can be thousands of dollars. And so it's just another program that the state of Vermont has and that you as a senator have approved over time, and we appreciate that. That helps to both attract and retain businesses in the state of Vermont.
Many times on this show, we have kind of taken a look back 35, 40 years ago. When I was in school, certainly in high school, we had what we used to call shop class, and it came with sort of a negative connotation where, if you weren't going to go to college, then you have this other choice that you could make, but it wasn't necessarily a good one. It was sort of like if you didn't have anything else to do kind of thing. That has completely changed, thankfully, and we now have folks that are in the trades, whether that's electricity, plumbing, construction, carpentry, whatever it is, that are in great demand and that can command pretty good salaries because we need more of all of those types of people. In other words, when we're going to build a hotel downtown or up on Killington, the Village Center, we don't have enough people right now to buy or to build and actually construct stuff. So I know that you had, not necessarily personally, Lyle, but you had come up with this Bring Back the Trades event that was very successful last year at Castleton University, or Vermont State University at Castleton. And I know that we're going to have another one coming up, but have you seen anything as a result of that in terms of businesses saying to you, boy, that was a great idea, and we've hired 5 guys from that or 5 gals from that?
Yep. If you were to talk to the city of Rutland, I believe they hired 2 people as a result of that. To bring back their trades piece. That's going to be, the name is going to change this year. It's now called Workforce in Motion. It's going to be taking place again at Castleton in May. And the goal of that is circular, where young students are introduced to businesses at this event. They then go to a training program that's being developed for summer, and then they get hired after that. So we're hoping that will, into the future, become a circular event where students, again, are being introduced to people that are excited about the job that they're in, that happens to be the trades, and that they can then get the training that they need so that they can get immediately hired. And interestingly enough, you talk about salaries. I just visited Beta Technologies up in South Burlington. And they are developing, as people probably know, battery-powered planes. And starting salary, $26 an hour. You do not need to have a great deal of experience. They'll do the training. They pay for your lunch. They have a cafeteria there with a chef. They have great benefits. And all they need are the people. And so it goes back to circular again. We need to introduce young people to all the great careers that are in the trades. The money will follow, but we just need to introduce them. And that's what bring back the trades, and now to be called Workforce in Motion. That's what that's going to do for the Rutland region.
Yeah, I was really happy when you folks put that together last year, that it was 7th and 8th graders as well as high school students that were exposed to this event. I don't think you can ever be too early with it, but certainly 7th and 8th grade is a great start, and that's when kids begin to think about what they want to do when they get out of high school. And again, with all due respect, because I went to a 4-year college here in Vermont at Middlebury, but and there's certainly room for both. If people have a burning desire to get a degree in philosophy, for instance, well, go right ahead. That's great, and we certainly need that too. But I think for too long we were not paying enough attention and not making it a positive thing to learn a trade, and I think we are now. So I'm glad to hear that it did have a result, and I'm looking forward to that Workforce in Motion event then coming up in May. Again, at Castleton, you said at one point I thought maybe we were going to outgrow it quickly.
Well, they're looking at using additional parking lots, so it is growing. And if you know Russ Marson, he's been the person behind this. 2,000 high school students were there last year, 2,000 kids, as you say, 6 through 12. He's looking for like 3,000 this year. He wants to go for a record. Wow. And the record will only help our business and industry, because wherever I've been going recently, Brian, they all say the same thing. We need employees. As part of that, we need housing. And so I'd love to talk about CHIP just for a second, if that's okay. Yeah,
we're going to take our second break first, but that was my next topic, yeah. And you're right, Russ is a rather dynamic personality. He's physically very big, at least I think he is, because I'm really small, and we get along great, and I want to have him back on the show for sure. He's been on a couple of times. We've had him up at the delegation meeting at the State House, but he's a perfect guy to ramrod that whole event, and I'll be looking forward to attending that in May, assuming we get out this year in time to do that. I'm not looking forward to going into June again this year, but you never know. Again, given the extremely important decisions that need to be made with respect to our changes in our educational system, you never know when we're going to get out. All right, so we're going to take our second break. We've got about 10 minutes left on the show. And again, we're talking today to Lyle Jepson, who is the commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the state of Vermont. And we will be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your host of the hour-long show each and every week. And again, it runs through runs on all 5 Catamount radio stations, and I want to make sure that I get the PEG TV plug-in again. PEG TV airs all of these as well, and they're archived, so you can look up a particular date and who was on it and kind of a topic about, what the program was for, and then at your convenience, you can zoom in and listen to it. And I know people are doing that because I have people tell me all the time. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society. Vermont State Fair, folks, 180th coming up here in Rutland on August of 2026. And today, again, we're talking to Lyle Jepson, who is the Commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the state of Vermont. So we've talked a little bit about TIFs, the Tax Increment Financing Vehicle, but we also want to talk about CHIP, which is kind of like TIF, but smaller, or maybe more eloquently put, project-based, right?
Absolutely. And so people probably have heard about the projects in Rutland and Killington that both have a TIF district. You need to get permission to have a district, and you get that through the Vermont Economic Progress Council, a council set up by the governor and the legislature. And a district, when it's created, is allowed to take anything where a building is built and it is putting more money into the grand list. That funding, a large chunk of it, can go to pay for infrastructure that allowed that project to be built. And so the taxes that come from this additional infrastructure that's built and the buildings would not have been there had it not been for this district. And so the new taxes, a majority of the taxes, then pay for water lines and sewer lines and other things that communities like Rutland City or Killington wouldn't be able to afford to do on their own. The Killington project being, $80 million of infrastructure work, and Rutland City, it could be as much as $7 million of infrastructure work that, again, couldn't happen had it not had a TIF district that would generate the revenue that would pay off those projects. And so CHIP is a little bit different because TIF allows for commercial development and housing, but CHIP is just for housing. And so CHIP stands for the Community and Housing Infrastructure Program, and it's brand new this year, created by the Vermont Economic Progress Council. And I have to give a shout out here to John Russell, our local person, who is the chair of that council, and he is very active in making sure that our region and all regions of the state take advantage of this new CHIP program. And so the CHIP program, it will, just like a TIF, it will create a small district that housing will be developed within, not commercial development necessarily, but housing. And it will be for primary residents, not for a second home. And so it will allow for similar taxation where, let's say, a 30-unit apartment building is built. It will increase the tax base significantly in that town that it's built in. And the taxes from that, additional taxes, a majority of those taxes will be retained by the municipality and not sent to the state to pay off the infrastructure, which would be sewer, water, housing, utilities, that type of thing. And so it's a great project. It's anticipated the legislature has allowed $200 million a year for the next 10 years to be put into that project, meaning that taxpayers are not paying that to what will be $2 billion, but the taxpayers are being allowed to retain the increment that is built as a result of new development. They're able to retain that in their community and pay off the infrastructure. So it's a huge benefit for the housing industry and a huge benefit to our employers who need places for their employees to live. And that program will be launching in January of this coming year. And
the West Rutland project came before CHIP, so right. That was kind of a different thing. But I attended that grand opening; it was great. But there was one also in Fairhaven, an old racetrack, and that I think could take advantage of this new program, right?
that absolutely could. And so Joe Gunter, the town manager out there, he arranged to have the governor come down and re-sign the CHIP bill in that field that you're talking about on the racetrack, because that's exactly the type of location that needs water and sewer development that this project would then pay for, and to enable housing to be built in Fairhaven, which obviously we always talk housing. And now this is a project and a program that can help make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I was glad that I was in the legislature when that bill passed. I can remember that day. It was a little bit warm, but we all gathered in Fairhaven, and it was great to have the governor come down and sign that bill in person. So we're looking forward to many more projects, not just in Rutland County, but as you say now, with your focus statewide throughout the whole Vermont landscape. So we've got about 5 minutes left, Lyle, and I don't know. And again, our guest today, Lyle Jepson, who's now the commissioner of the Department of Economic Development for the state of Vermont. If there anything else that you want to bring us up to date with, we're going to obviously love to have you come back on at some point too.
Well, I'd like to add on to the housing piece just a little bit. Why this CHIP project is so important, or the program is so important, is the cost of constructing housing now is astronomical. Just for affordable units, there was a study that was done to have an affordable housing unit that regular Vermonters can afford, an apartment, that the cost is generally about $45,000 in infrastructure for each unit. So if you're going to build 10 units, you're talking $450,000 just in the infrastructure before you even begin to build. And that primarily makes it unaffordable for a developer to come in and build the home or the housing development. So CHIP will provide the runway for developers to be able to pencil out projects that will provide for housing that the regular Vermonter can afford. And so we're very much looking forward to that project. And as far as other things that are happening, I was surprised by the total amount of funding that's flowing from the state into our communities. And that funnels from both taxation through the state, but also in large part from the federal government. Over the last, just in 2025 alone, the Vermont Northern Borders Regional Borders Commission put $26 million into Vermont projects. And so that happened throughout the state of Vermont, primarily infrastructure, primarily for housing development. And so it's exciting to see the people that I'm working with so charged up about helping the communities around the state. We've got some great people working in the Department of Economic Development. And our department, if people probably are not aware, we are within the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which includes the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Housing, and the Tourism and Marketing Department. So we all work very closely together. And at the end of the day, our goal is to bring more people to Vermont, have housing for them to be able to live in, have that be affordable, and have education that meets the needs of all of our young people.
Yeah, the other program is VHIP, which we got only about a minute on, the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, which in essence takes existing structures that have fallen into disrepair and allows the landlords or the owners of those buildings some grants. There are guardrails around it. You have to have certain things happen, but that seems like that has also been a pretty good program, and that continues.
That does continue, and you as a legislator will be asked to continue to provide funding for that, so stay tuned.
Oh, I know I will, and as I say, it's funny, if you get good reports, Lyle, from what's happening on the ground, you're much more likely to keep things going. All too often, we, at least in my view, seem to pass bills, create statutes, pass legislation, and then never look at it again. Just assume that what we did was correct and the right thing to do at the time. And in many cases, it wasn't. In many cases, it isn't working. But we don't ever hear about that until it reaches a certain point. Then we got to go back and change the law and amend it again. So it's always nice to hear, and I did hear that all the time from folks that use the VIA program, that it really made a difference between, painting a building or putting up new siding or whatever it was. The amount of the grant was not necessarily enough to completely rebuild the whole thing, but it put it back on the market, so to speak.
Well, and it did, and because of rising costs for building materials and everything else, it made it pencil out, and so people can actually do what they're hoping to do, which is to put Vermonters in safe, clean, affordable homes. Yep,
for sure. Well, it has been a pleasure. We've been talking to Lyle Jepson, formerly the executive director of CEDAR, the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region, now the commissioner for the whole state of Vermont of the Department of Economic Development and in the Scott administration, obviously. And it's been a pleasure having you on today. I look forward to possibly running into you at the State House when we convene in the not-too-distant future. And if not, we'll hopefully see you back here at a CEDAR event or some other event back in Rutland, Lyle.
Well, and thank you for having me today. And I know we're going to run into each other. I think we already have appointments to go before committee, so I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks again for joining us. And we will see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.